My sister refused to let my disabled child attend her wedding because he would ruin the photos. She claims I ended her marriage after her husband discovered it months later. Hello everyone. I am a 35-year-old lady, and my sister Carol, whose name has changed, is 29 and married around 4 months ago. Unfortunately, neither my family nor I were invited to the wedding. For whatever reason, Carol and I were always. It was very upsetting for me because we were so close. Her transition into a true bridezilla began around the time of her wedding. If I am not mistaken, she began acting entirely differently as soon as she received a ring. A few months later, when the invites were being sent out, she called to notify me that I would not be receiving one due to my son's wheelchair condition. After that incident, I decided to cut her completely out of my life because it was so disrespectful and insensitive of her. I did not make a big issue about it, nor did anyone else. My 2 children, an 8-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, had a strong bond with their aunt. I was thus. This startled me considerably. My kid has been confined to a wheelchair since sustaining serious injuries in an accident over 2 years ago. We hope that with rehabilitation, he will eventually be able to walk independently. However, he utilizes a wheelchair until then, and I believe that everyone should be aware of this. And I realized Carol and I had grown apart, and there was no turning back when she called me a few months earlier to say she had decided not to ask me and the rest of my family to the wedding because of my son. Naturally, I was stunned, because despite her argument for something like this was so fragile and dumb, she had told me that she was concerned about the quality of her wedding photos if my child was present because she believed his wheelchair would damage them. That, after all, had a relatively straightforward solution. If she really wanted my son out of the photos, she could simply ask the photographer to leave him out. However, that thought was extremely harsh and a terrible way to think, so I did not attempt to create it. During our phone chat, I told her that I was perfectly fine with not being invited to the wedding, but I didn't really bring it up to everyone else except my hubby after that. I knew that if I discussed this with other people, there would be a lot of drama, which I didn't want, given how delicate the matter is. I disregarded it because I did not want my son to get engaged in any of this. Even though I knew I wasn't invited, I kept up a good front around my parents and Carol in the months leading up to the wedding. She followed suit, so when I missed to attend her wedding, many people were surprised and contacted me to ask why I hadn't gone. Nonetheless, I kept the truth to myself and informed everyone that I couldn't attend because my father-in-law had become seriously ill and our family needed to be there for him. No one, not even my parents or my brother-in-law, Kevin, asked any further questions. Things became evident only after we all reunited for my cousin's engagement party. Because we were all in the same place at the time, Kevin chose to surround my husband and me and express his disappointment that none of us had attended the wedding, as well as his disappointment that we had not followed up. He stated that, while he understood why I couldn't go because my father-in-law was ill, he was upset that we hadn't followed up with them after the wedding. Given our good friendship, he couldn't understand this behavior. Kevin and I had always gotten along well, as Carol had dated him for about 4 years before to their marriage. Thus, he had effectively joined the family, and we had become great friends, much like my husband. He refused to budge when I tried to apologize and convince him that we would make up to him in some way since I didn't want to discuss the real reason I hadn't gone or communicated with them. He said that he was confident that something was wrong and wanted to know if he was the one who had upset us or not. Since Kevin is typically a kind guy, my husband and I finally decided that he deserved an explanation and that we would tell him the truth about why we had decided not to go. Furthermore, I didn't want him to think he made a mistake, and that's why we didn't go, because he'd blame himself. I then told him about a phone discussion I had with Carol a few months before their wedding, during which she informed me that, due to my son, she did not want me to go with the rest of my family. I stated to him that I had kept everything to myself for the last few months because I didn't want to start any drama before the wedding, and that it was difficult for me to even bring up I'm quite sensitive about my son. When I revealed the reason, he was taken aback, but he said he understood why I hadn't told anyone and why I decided to avoid Carol ever since. Kevin even went so far as to apologize to me on his wife's behalf, telling me that if he had known she was going to say something like this, he would have stopped her before she could even think about calling. He apologized sincerely for the entire thing, and I could tell Carol was giving me a cruel look for the rest of the party because Kevin was sitting with my husband and me, ignoring her the entire time after our conversation. Since staying with us, I could see he was extremely upset by what he had just discovered. The entire time. He is not even to fault. If my spouse had behaved in this manner with their own sister, I would have been horrified. In any event, we all went home after the party, and I honestly didn't think I'd have to bring this up again so soon. But here we are. My parents called me yesterday, about 3 days after the party, to tell me that they had found the real reason I hadn't attended my sister's wedding. They claimed they didn't want to get involved, but they wanted to let me know that Carol had been quite distraught since I told Kevin the truth. He has pushed her to go to treatment since he believes she is extremely cruel and merciless. They've been squabbling nonstop because Carol believes she made the correct decision since, in her opinion, which is utterly ridiculous, her wedding would have failed otherwise. Furthermore, I agree with Kevin that she's rather unpleasant. She accused me of damaging her wedding by telling Kevin about what happened all those months ago and attempting to turn him against me in order to exact revenge, but my parents refused to take sides. Personally, I think it's ridiculous that she's blaming me, and despite my parents saying at least 4 or 5 times when we first spoke that they didn't want to take sides, it appears that they agree with Carol, which is why they contacted me to express her thoughts with me in the first place. Although my husband does not think I should feel awful about it, I discussed it with him and would like a second view. I would have thrown my sister under the bus by telling her husband the truth. That's why I didn't attend their wedding. I decided to speak with my parents about this in general because I was thoroughly annoyed that, despite their best efforts to give the impression that they would not, they had made the effort to contact me and share Carol's experiences with me, even though they didn't have to. Carol could have called me directly, and we would have handled it ourselves if she had wanted me to be aware. My parents could choose to keep out of the problem totally if they did not want to become involved. I have no idea why. However, it appeared to be an attempt to make me feel bad for being honest with Kevin and causing trouble in their marriage. I wanted to understand what was going on, so I made the decide to face them and inquire about their intentions. I visited them earlier today and expressed my concerns with them. At first, they denied everything and told me that if they told me what was going on with Carol, I would take the initiative to end the problem since they did not want their 2 daughters to argue. That was especially odd because it meant that they were indirectly becoming involved if they honestly wanted someone to step up and handle the issue or whatever. I didn't think that made sense, but it did. It was really annoying that they were attempting to control me when they could have directed Carol to try chatting to me rather than approaching me directly. Because I'm not a fool, I could tell what they were thinking, so I asked them to be honest with me. My parents then decided to be honest, and only honest. They informed me that they believed I was partially to fault for telling Kevin the truth because I had no genuine reason to do so. Since everyone had moved on from that incident, and it had been months since it occurred, I saw no reason to bring it up again and cause turmoil in an otherwise happy marriage in order to seek retribution. I thought that was extremely disrespectful, especially because I had no intention of causing difficulties in her marriage. Doing anything like that would be detrimental to me, and my parents' belief that I was also striving to do so was disrespectful. Carol was clearly the one who began the conflict, therefore she was going to do whatever it took to make herself look like the victim, so I didn't mind if she tried to make it appear that way. I expected this from her, but not from my parents, especially since they insisted on not taking sides. I felt very upset and informed my parents that it was evident they were on Carol's side rather than mine if this was how they perceived me. In addition, I warned him that it was quite disrespectful of them to blame me for telling. Kevin told the truth while completely ignoring the fact that it was bad. I also told them that if Kevin hadn't insisted on knowing what had happened that day, I would not have told him the truth, but that now that everything was out, I could see what my parents' priorities were. The fact that their younger daughter had expressed that she did not want their grandson to attend her wedding due to circumstances beyond his control did not seem to disturb them in the least. My parents were aware that I was especially sensitive to my son's ailments during that stressful period for the entire family. I couldn't believe they were being this nonchalant about it, and tried to make it look like I was overreacting, and it was ridiculous that they didn't care about something like this. They tried to fight with me, saying that while they cared for their grandson, it was Carol's wedding, and they couldn't help it if she didn't want our family present because of the wheelchair situation. They also believed that she had every right to reject certain people from the invitation. I agree with that. She had every right to deny our invitation, and I had every right to be offended. And it was perfectly acceptable if I decided to end all communication with her and never speak to her again as a result of this. Above all, Everyone should be perfectly fine with me informing her husband what she did to keep us from going to the wedding, because if she made a decision, she should have the fortitude to stay to it. Even after I mentioned all of these important details, my parents began to tell me that I was exaggerating the situation and that I had no right to discuss what had happened with Kevin and to make a big deal out of nothing. After that, I didn't see the point in continuing the conversation, so I simply left because it was clear that they were now taking sides, and I didn't want to be involved. I told my husband about it when I got home an hour ago, and he was pleased that I had decided to stand up for myself by telling Kevin the truth earlier and confronting my parents today. Thus, I no longer care what others think. Update 2: since I didn't want Carol to be able to contact me, I recently blocked her everywhere. It's been about a week since the party, and 3 days since my disagreement with my parents. I don't really want to talk to any of them, therefore they're all blocked for now. Everyone, of course, but Kevin. We haven't communicated since the party, and I'm not sure why I should block him. In any case, Carol decided to write my son on Instagram and beg him to link her with me, because she needed to talk to me about certain issues, despite the fact that I had banned everyone. I was not pleased when my kid informed me that she had contacted him. We haven't actually spoken to or. He had recently mentioned his aunt and was perplexed. He also has a hunch that something is wrong between us, albeit he is unaware what happened. Despite being a toddler, he is quite knowledgeable and aware of everything. Furthermore, he has frequently inquired about my sister and my relationship in recent months, but I've always managed to avoid the matter. Carol had stated that I had blocked her, and my son knew that this was an extreme measure, so he began to demand to know what was going on this time. He told me that he really needed to know what was going on. I initially thought I wouldn't tell him, but I ultimately decided to tell him everything. I knew he would be upset, but I couldn't keep things like this from him forever, so I told him the truth about why we had not attended his aunt's wedding. Because they can still reach my son, even if they can't reach me, I was concerned that if I hadn't told him, he would have found out about it another way. I assumed he was mature enough to decide whether or not he wanted to maintain his relationship with his aunt after this, especially given that he will be 13 in a few months. I believed it was better to simply educate him since I wanted him to have the opportunity to make his own decision. Because I am the one who is so concerned about the injuries and other issues, I must admit that I had no idea what to expect when I told him what his aunt had said. It goes without saying that he will be tenfold more sensitive to it. However, he was surprised to find they handled it rather cordially. Despite his constant demands to know, he thanked me for concealing this information from him for so long. He also thanked me for alerting him at this time, as he had become tired of the mystique surrounding the entire matter. However, now that he knows why we missed his aunt's wedding and haven't interacted with her in a long time, he perfectly understands why I blocked her. Because I didn't want him to feel rejected by his family, I did everything I could to ensure his well-being. I even had significant qualms about notifying him at first since I felt like I was burdening him with unnecessary information. However, the more I spoke with him, the more I realized that my son was much older than I had imagined, and he assured me that he would have learnt about it in some way, because it appears that the family will be unable to move on from these consequences. He also mentioned that hearing something like this might have been upsetting for other children in his situation. However, he chose to be honest because he has already faced enough adversity in his life to be unconcerned by such trifling behavior. Even though I was confident that he and Carol had gotten along in the past, seeing him explain it and keep such a bold face made me extremely happy because it confirmed that my husband and I had raised him appropriately. As a result, I'm actually glad I chose to be open and honest with him at this moment. Since then, I've made an attempt to discover whether he's truly fine with things or whether he's just acting. That works for us. And it appears that he doesn't care about his aunt's opinion. We're all here for him, even though I know he's in suffering, at least in his heart. I adore him, as does his father, and most importantly, his sister is always there for him. His friends have always been by his side, making an effort to include him in everything. He also receives incredible love from his instructors, and I am confident that all of his scars will eventually heal. I'm convinced he'll be well, both mentally and physically. Furthermore, I am confident that we will all support him, even if he isn't. Hello, Update 3. I'd like to address some of the concerns that people have about my decision to be honest with my child before we begin addressing what happened. My son and I have always had an honest and open connection, And my husband, parents, and I all believe that honesty is the best course of action. Since he insisted on it, I had done everything I could to keep the truth from him for his benefit, since I did not want to offend him. Even if he hadn't heard from us, he might have spoken with his grandparents or whatever, and things like this have a way of coming out in a negative way, so I felt compelled to inform him. Furthermore, if Carol herself had decided to tell him, it wouldn't have been impossible. Given that she had previously contacted him to inform him that I had blocked her, it would have been a lot worse. She certainly had no qualms about dragging him into something he wasn't involved in, so she might have told him why we were fighting as well. Furthermore, I am aware that she lacks the sensitivity required to manage such circumstances. As a result, he preferred to hear it from us rather than someone else. I stand by my decision, and I believe it is acceptable to have handled the situation the way I did, as long as my family agrees. Now, let's discuss what happened with Carol this evening. Carol appeared unexpectedly while my family and I were at home. I sent my kids to hang out with the neighbors since I knew some drama was about to break out and didn't want them to hear anything unusual Carol had to say. She began to convey her disapproval with my decision to speak with Kevin about what had happened as soon as the children had left, arguing that there was no reason for doing so. She stated that I was being petty and vindictive. And because of me, she hadn't been able to have a real chat with Kevin in the last few days since he wouldn't talk to her unless she agreed to undergo treatment. He'd just quit the conversation, leave, or finally start a. She was tired of quarreling with him every time she tried to explain herself. She also suspected that he had gotten tired of her and had started avoiding her on purpose, returning home as late as possible to avoid having to deal with her after work. In my opinion, there was nothing wrong with what he was doing, and I would have probably done the same thing. After she had finished venting, I told her that I was not to blame for anything. I informed her that she wouldn't. She would have had to be concerned about her own behavior if she had merely been a nice person, and I refused to be held responsibility for something I had not done. She transferred her guilty conscience onto me by labeling me bitter, petty, and vengeful, among other things. She was attempting to paint me as the villain and lay all of the blame on me because she knew deep down that she was the one who had messed up, but she was not ready to admit it. After that, I expected we'd continue our disagreement, and she seemed ready to answer, but then she broke down and started crying on my couch. Both my husband and I were surprised because we had no idea what to do, and had not expected to simply stand there looking uncomfortable as she sobbed. It was very startling. I finally decided to sit next to her, but I didn't say anything to soothe her. I simply sat beside her and waited for her to calm down a little. After a while, she began to apologize and admit that I was accurate, and that she had long since realized how disrespectful and insensitive what she had said was. Furthermore, the reason she had been struggling was that, after learning the truth, Kevin had decided to put their plans to have a child on hold indefinitely. He wanted her to go to therapy because he felt her treatment of her nephew was harsh. Right now, he couldn't trust her to be a good mother. She was fully prepared to become a mother and had been looking forward to it since she married, so it genuinely shattered her heart. However, it now appears unlikely to happen anytime soon, which is why she has been so indignant and angry about everything. Rather than face the circumstances, she had been seeking to escape it and find a scapegoat. It had been me up to this point, but as she thought about it more, she understood that she was the only one accountable for the way things had come out and expressed her heartfelt apologies for everything. I was expecting another heated dispute at the time, but she was abruptly apologizing to us, so I had no idea what to respond. After a while, my husband and I simply exchanged glances and informed her that, while we forgive her, we highly recommended her to seek therapy because her earlier acts were plainly unreasonable and disturbing. Her behavior was unusual, and Kevin may have been correct when he stated that she was not yet ready to be a mother. It was rough but direct, and she kept crying. I soothed her a little since I felt terrible for her, but as she was leaving, I told her that I still intended to avoid talking to her for a while. She told me she would keep her distance from me and said nothing about it, presumably realizing that I was still processing everything that had transpired. For the time being, I'm content with the way things are, but I'm not sure what the future holds or whether we'll ever be able to reunite. I haven't spoken to my parents since our dispute, and even if I end up making up with my sister, I doubt I will do the same with my parents. My parents never made it clear that I was their golden child yet. They always had a soft spot for Carol and tried to hide it. However, I've learned a few things over the years, including the fact that they believe that as I become older, I should always make these sacrifices, extend forgiveness, and be more forgiving in general. However, I do not think I will continue to play that character. Nothing is more important to me than my family, which includes my spouse and children. We are one entity, so if others don't value them, it means they don't value me either. I will not forgive anyone who has disrespected my son anytime soon. I informed him after his aunt's departure that she expressed. She apologized for her comments, and it is now up to my child to decide whether or not to forgive her. He did tell me that he doesn't care if she apologizes or not, since he's already decided that nothing will ever alter him. So the apology isn't important and he's fine with whatever. That appears to be a lovely, laid-back approach, but given his youth, I'm not sure how long he will feel that way. Version 4. Hello. The important development has occurred, and because I've been sharing it everywhere, I figured I'd post it here as well. It has been 3 years since I last provided Anne. My youngster has recently started walking with crutches. He still needs aid in progressively improving. He still needs a wheelchair when he gets fatigued, but we've been told that we may expect more progress in the future and that one day he'll be able to walk on his own. For our family, this is a tremendously exciting occasion, and we are overjoyed. Carol and I don't communicate as frequently as we used to, but we still talk on occasion. She called me a few weeks ago, and I recently congratulated her on her new kid.